Hey, everybody. If you're looking to try to factor a complex trinomial in a really fast way, then I want to go through 3 trinomials, complex ones, and show you a way that something I call fast factoring, a little fast factoring chart that you can use to help you out. So let's jump right in. You see 3 trinomials up on the screen. I'm going to use these 3 as examples of a method to factor, and then also some look-fors that can really speed you up. I'm not joking when I say 15 seconds to factor. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to zero in on that trinomial in that first spot. Let's take a look at 8a squared plus 14a minus 15. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to build a little fast factoring chart just off to the right. I look at my leading coefficient, my 8, and I might say, hey, 2 numbers that multiply to give 8. And I write them above each other, 4 and 2. Then I take a look and I say, 2 numbers that multiply to give the constant, 15. And maybe I try 5 and 3. Now, there are a couple things I'll notice. It's actually a negative 15. So because that's negative, I'm looking for 2 numbers now that are going to collect, but subtract to give me 14. And what I do up in my blue fast factoring chart is I multiply across. There's a 12, there's a 10, and there's no way that I can put a 12 and a 10 together to give me 14. So what I need to do is look at another combination. And maybe rather than it being 5 and 3, it's 3 and 5. And now I go through the same process. If I multiply across, there's a 20, multiply across, there's a 6. I can get 14 out of that. Nice. So now what I just need to do is put my signs on the 20 and the 6. If they're going to come together to give me a positive 14, then I need a positive 20 and a negative 6. And you'll notice I get a little confirmation. The negative 3 times the positive 5 gives me my negative 15. I know that my fast factoring chart works. So all I need to do then, in my blue fast factoring chart, write out my factors and put in the obvious stuff, my brackets and my variables. So the top of that chart would represent a 4a minus 3, and the bottom of that chart would represent a 2a plus 5. And if you do a quick check on that expansion, you'll notice that you get back to the original. So what that fast factoring chart does is it just allows me to skip writing in the obvious stuff, the brackets and the variables. And so it speeds me up in that process. So let me shrink that back down, and there we go. That is a fast factoring chart. And that's the best one that I've come across. And so if you use that method, you can get really, really fast at factoring. Okay, let's zero in on the second one. What I'm going to do now is I'm just going to start to combine elements of what's in the trinomial with some general numeracy understanding and that fast factoring chart. Okay, here we go. Okay, 2 numbers that multiply to give 9. I tend to start in the middle, so I'll go 3 and 3 as opposed to 9 and 1. Then I jump down to the end. Okay, this becomes a look-for that speeds you up. I know right now that when I try to guess 2 numbers, 2 factors of 4, that it cannot be 2 and 2. Okay, why does this not work? Well, take a look at what I need to add to. I need to add to 15. 15 is an odd number. And when I multiply by 2 and I multiply by 2, you'll notice I create 6s. I create even numbers. And there's no way to put together 2 even numbers, adding or subtracting, that give you an odd. It can't happen. So I know right from the get-go that if I am going to be able to factor 4 into, or if this trinomial is factorable, it cannot be 2 and 2 as my factors of 4. So I'm going to skip over that and I'm going to go right to 4 and 1. That allows me to save some time. So I do a quick check now. There's a 12 and a 3. I can get 15 out of that if both of those are positive. And you'll notice we end up getting our positive 4 on the end. So the only thing I need to do, put in my brackets and my variables, and I am good. Okay, to really speed up, I don't even put in those little crisscross signs in my chart. So like if I went back to that first one, I am not going to go through and put in those little gold lines that multiply across. I know I'm multiplying across. I do like to put in those signs though, the green operations. It just helps me, speeds me up a little bit when I'm copying them out in order to write in my factors. Okay, I want to show you another way that we can speed up the process through fast factoring. So I take a peek at my last trinomial, and you'll notice you now start to get a lot of combinations. Okay, two numbers are multiplied to give 6. It could be 3 or 2, or it could be 6 and 1. You jump down to two numbers are multiplied to give 21. It could be 7 and 3. It could be 21 and 1. And then any combination of those. And so sometimes people will look at that and they'll say, oh, so this is where the guess and check aspect of this fast factoring isn't that great. And here's where I'm going to argue to you. There are certain look-fors that allow you to avoid those combinations. We just went through one of them in the last trinomial, odd and even numbers. This one I'm going to talk about deals with common factors. Take a look at the original trinomial, 6x squared minus 11x minus 21. You'll notice there is no common factor in that trinomial. And so when I go to create my fast factoring chart, I'm conscious that there is no common factor. So let's say I start off and I say, I'm going to have two numbers that multiply to give 6. It could be 3 or 2. It could be 6 or 1. Well, now when I jump down and say two numbers that multiply to give 21, and I go 3 and 7, you see, I know that that combination of factors could not be possible. Because look at the top of my fast factoring chart. Remember the stuff that I don't write in there, the brackets and the variables. If that chart were possible, then there would be a factor of 3x, let's say plus 3 or minus 3. It doesn't matter for this instance. But notice, you have a common factor in that factor, which means you would have to have a common factor in the original. And you don't. So I know that that factor is not possible, which allows me to not waste my time checking it. So if I went right back to the beginning and I said, if I see 3 and 2, then I know the only combination that could work with that would be a 7 and a 3 or the 21. Oh, wait a second. I can't put the 21 across from the 3 because that has a common factor, and so you get to avoid that one and only try the 1 and 21. If you chose 6 and 1, then the same thing. I cannot try 21 and 1. It would have to be 1 and 21. And I could not use 3 and 7. It would have to be 7 and 3. So what you're doing is you're taking what may appear like a lot of possibilities and you're narrowing them down relatively quickly. Okay, if I was to go through and try to factor this one, I tend to start in the middle. So I'm going to go 3 and 2. Now as I'm writing down my factors of 21, I'll try 7 and 3 first, and I'm going to make sure that I don't put the 3's across from each other. I multiply across, and I get a 14 and a 9. 14 and 9, I cannot get an 11 from. So I know that that one doesn't work, and I don't waste my time flipping the 3 and the 7. So what do I end up doing in my chart? Well, I'll end up erasing off my 3 and 7, and I will change that immediately to a 1 and 21. Well, now I look at that and I say, well, 3 times 21 is going to make such a big number. There's no way I'm going to be able to subtract off the small number and get close to 11. So I know that 3 and 2 was a bad choice. So now I'm going to switch to 6 and 1. When I write down two numbers that multiply to give 21, I am not putting the 6 and the 3 across from each other. And so instead, I'm going to write the 7 and the 3. And when I multiply across, I get an 18 and a 7. I can get an 11 out of that. I need it to be a negative 11. So I need my bigger number, 18, to be negative, and my smaller number, 7, to be positive. Well, put in your brackets and your variables, and you are good. Okay, there we go. You can confirm by re-expanding that you get back to the original, and so therefore those are factored expressions. Now, I know it might seem like I did not factor that in 15 seconds, but that's because I'm doing an awful lot of blabbing while I'm doing it. With some practice, using those tips, odd and even numbers, common factors, you can really start to move your way through using that little blue fast factoring chart. Okay, something for you to try. It really helps. Best of luck.